Thank you so much, Tobias. I might be out of a job. Good work. Thanks to all of you for joining us. All right, we'll give you just a minute to get yourselves together. Put those masks back on. That's right. Good job. All right, so now it's time to move this along and get started with our first panel of the day, for which I would like to welcome back André Hoffmann to the stage, as well as Pavan Sukhdev. I saw him make an entrance, and Gerard Bos is, here you are. I didn't see you back there. All right.
I just took it off, yeah? Just took it off.
Just took it off, okay. I'm gonna be the mask police.
Like
all right, there you go, great. You have a double. You're not playing around. We have two. Okay, feel free to take a seat or stand, whatever you're most comfortable with.
Yeah.
I might do a little standing, actually. Do you like? Whatever you want.
I'm mic'd up, so it's okay. Yeah.
You want to sit? Okay.
Yeah. Actually, no, stand. Why not? We're sitting on the train.
I don't mean to peer pressure everybody into standing. I just,
sitting on the train all morning, but
I feel less okay. I feel less constrained when I get to stand. All right. Well, great to see you, gentlemen. Thank you so much for being here this morning. André, we already heard a little bit about you, but for those of you that missed André's opening presentation this morning, just very briefly, Vice Chairman of Roche Holding, President of Fondation MAVA, Fondation Tour du Valais de Camargue, Board Member of System IQ, Member of the Board of Trustees of the World Economic Forum, among many other things. But today, he's also representing Intent, which is the partner organization of today's event, which is something that he co-founded along with his wife, Rosalie. So, André, welcome back. Pavan.
Thank you.
So good to see you again. A scientist by education, an international banker by training, so very diverse background, and an environmental economist by passion. Founder and CEO of GIST. You are also the current president and board chair of WWF International. So during his career, Pavan took time out to lead 2 landmark UN reports, the TEEB, the Economics of Ecosystems and Biodiversity, and UN EPs towards a green economy in 2011. And to wrap it up, studied physics at the University of Oxford. So you're one of these guys who always has some kind of conversation to bring to the table, right? Can talk about so many different things. And Gerard Bos, the first time that I have the pleasure of having you on this stage, so it's great to meet you. Head of the International Union for Conservation of Nature's Global Business and Biodiversity Program, otherwise known as the IUCN. But he is responsible for the implementation of IUCN's business engagement strategy and serves as focal point for all business and biodiversity-related matters at the IUCN. So before joining in 2012, you worked for 5 years in Barclays Bank in London and Madrid, and for 17 years in Holcim, one of the largest building materials producers in Europe, USA, and Africa. So also a very diverse background, finance, construction, and now we're in biodiversity. I realize there's a link which you can address later on, but
So do we.
his passion for bringing together different parts of society to find optimal solutions for transformational change is what ultimately led you from your financial path to the IUCN. All right, so before we get started with kind of jumping into the subject of biodiversity for business, I want to hear, what did you take away from this presentation? What did you guys think of the pitches?
I was super inspired. Listening to the bee diversity, for me, that's a true example of a nature-based solutions. It's using nature's ingenuity and combining it and linking it to data and artificial intelligence, and really seeing on how we can leverage on that. I can't thank Thomas for mentioning NBS many times in his presentation. Concept that IUCN put on the table and wants really to further, because we think that's a way to get to the finance world as well, by really describing better and having a standard around nature-based solutions. We'll come back to that. Tony, I loved your comment to say saying engineers love nature. It helps them in making sure that it works. And that's a word that we need to get out more, because at the moment we're not demonstrating as much as how nature can be an ally to a lot of man-made engineered construction. And finally, the 3-in-1, you know, being adaptive and resilient. That's where you are bringing both the human ingenuity together with the nature ingenuity. And that's what I really liked as the thread of the various pitches that we heard this morning. And hopefully we'll hear more this afternoon.
No doubt. Pavan, what did you take away?
I was very impressed. I'd read all the presentations on my train. I missed my train this morning, so I wasn't in time to see all of them. But from what I read and from what I saw of the last three, very, very interesting examples indeed. I think the ability to scale is really important. So I think where we are as a group of one of your groups, a group of group of engineers, scaling out the idea of providing sort of wetland-based absorption of waste. I think that sort of ability to scale, I think, is really important. So I was particularly pleased to see that. And I think overall, perhaps you were a little shy of saying how much you can actually show for both impacts and dependencies. So I'd like to hark back to Tobias's question right at the end, which was, you know, what do your projects have to do with the two underlying boundaries, climate and biodiversity? I think all of you have impacts on biodiversity, and that's important, but all of you are helping to manage dependencies as a result of climate, because the systems globally that are going to be worst affected and most affected by climate change as it comes, or by climate breakdown as I start calling it, are actually freshwater systems. And in some way or the other, all of you are in some way involved in helping humanity manage those dependencies. So I think in that sense, you are all connected to both these fundamental planetary boundaries of climate change and biodiversity. So congratulations again, really, really good work.
Yeah, well, I'm falling in the usual trap of being the last one to talk because, of course, you all said everything. But
I'll start with you next time.
Thank you. But what really sort of impressed me was the fact that we had Tobias representing the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands, coming from this school of thinking that what we need to do with nature is to protect it. And then we move seamlessly to this entrepreneur who are telling us, nature is a friend. We can do something with nature. We can use it. We can create a business model. We can make nature work for us. And so the cohabitation of these two ways or two approaches, I think, worked really well this morning, because we could really see that this is not just about trying to, what's the word? Retain something. It's about building something. It's about going forward. It's about investment, and it's about sustainable business models, and that's very exciting. I was also very pleased to see the Canton du Valais joining in, because of course the planners in general have a tendency of being not really too business-minded nor too nature-minded, and to see that you were, I don't know if Tony's still there, that you were able to introduce into your presentation all these elements of fostering biodiversity while helping security issues, while helping social and human systems, and as Pavan just mentioned, the dependency towards the system. I think that's very exciting, because it gives us a way forward. It allows us to, in many ways, to think how we are going to be able to construct this sustainable, this nature-based solution, NBS, which we are going to use for stability in human development. Now, I also would like to add that I'm absolutely petrified to be on stage with these two titans of financial thinking. I mean, I'm very much an amateur compared to them. So if you have taken a question, they are the guys. Thank you.
Imagine how I feel. I'm definitely bottom of the rung on that one. But and also something, it's innovation and talent coming out of Switzerland. You know, and there's so much happening here. I mean, just in the Valais region, just what we've seen this morning, what we have yet to see. I mean, I'd argue that there is something in the water here. Okay. All right. So as we get back now into our panel, we've already touched on a few of these points. You know, we're looking at business opportunities for biodiversity. Pavan, I'd like to hand this over to you. Sure. I believe you had a few words that you wanted to give us.
Yeah, so I just wanted to, I have material to share with you, because I'm also passionate about this space personally, and this triple intersection of biodiversity of climate leading to freshwater systems, because there are these dependency impact connections. And then technology as the enabler, and business, as André has rightly pointed out, as a force for good, but actually as a force for performance and profit as well. And the two are not irreconcilable. So there's this constant barrage of misinformation and disinformation and wrong information that suggests that somehow or the other you can either be environmentally responsible or you can have development and profits. And I completely refute that logic. It is not logic. It is actually kind of a strategy of those who can't do things right. I think the key takeaways I think we need to come to is that in this day and age, the use of technology as an enabler is not an option. And that's my story. If I may just spend a few moments sharing my story. I founded a company called GIST. We are basically measuring impacts. And I want to share with you how we measure water impacts. Because any corporation, any company has got direct and indirect impacts on nature. And those impacts need to be measured because that's where the demand for water is coming from. And excessive demands can lead to problems with residential users, problems with agriculturalists, and problems with companies themselves because of the lack of availability. One of my first and earliest experiences with dealing with large utilities was with Yarra Valley Water. And when I met them for the first time in Melbourne, they are Melbourne's largest water utility. It struck me that they were almost paranoid about doing their business well, not doing their business well. And I realized somewhere along the line that Melbourne had won the Economist Intelligence Unit Prize for the 5th time at that point as the most livable city. And guess what everyone thought was the most important aspect of livability was the delivery and availability of fresh water, basically fresh water and sanitation systems. And here was this utility with 1.9 million Melbourneian customers, clearly petrified that if they didn't get it right, they would lose that fantastic rating. Well, the good news is they got it right for another 2 years and then somebody else took over. But, and this lesson stayed with me. So when I founded my company and started the business, we realized that in this day and age, to solve any significant problem in sustainability or the environment, you just cannot run away from technology. You need it. You need data, you need information, and you need technology. So we conversely embraced it. Now, of course, I was a bit lucky, being an Indian, able to hire from the Indian Institutes of Technology. So we had lots of resources that we could use. But we've made metrics and analysis the basis of our insights. And I want to share with you some of the ways in which we help my company, that is just helps other companies to understand the issues. The issues you're all familiar with. 3 billion people live in agricultural areas and other areas where there's severe water scarcity, and it's been getting worse and worse, in fact 20% worse over the last 2 decades. The CDP, the Carbon Disclosure Project, did a survey recently where they said that 75% of all businesses surveyed by them said that water scarcity was a problem. So this is as significant as that. We don't have the right availability other than just going out and measuring. And the good news is that there's a lot of work. There's a lot of work, for instance, the WRI system, Aqueduct, provides water scarcity data at the basin level. But actually there's a paper by Huang et al., 2018, which has pulled together data literally down to the 50 by 50 area. So literally a grid which consists of 65,000 squares around the planet. And we've digitized that. And my company is in the business of making economic estimates. So here is our map which we've created. You can see that global map with the different shaded colors. Those colors represent the per cubic meter costs of drawing 1 cubic meter of water. So it goes from almost nothing in some areas to $18 per cubic meter and even higher in some areas. And you can see where the water scarcity has the most significant impact. Now, this is pure economic numbers, but the point is those dollar numbers mean a lot more in places like India, China, and South Africa than they would do necessarily in other areas in the richer parts of the world. So that's a huge significance out there in terms of how you use water and whether you're monitoring it or not, and whether the people who are responsible for the overuse are aware of the fact that they are overusing, and whether their governments and their societies are holding them to account and asking them for exactly the kind of innovations and new technologies and better management systems that all of you, whom I've been hearing and whom I've read about, are involved in. So the information that I present and what my company has been busy trying to share with our customers is information which drives people in the right direction in that sense. As I said, measuring scarcity at a basin level is nice, but large systems like the Rhone, I mean, the basin of the Rhone is massive. It's from Switzerland all the way down to the Mediterranean. So we can't draw much comfort from that, but you need to measure down to the location. And measuring to the location was a challenge 10 years ago. Today it's possible, we've done it, and this is the good news. And if I can run this, how does one run the? Sorry, this is actually meant to be a live. There should be a little PowerPoint slide separately that has been sent to you, which enables me to show the live demo as to how our system actually works. Yes, perfect. Now, if I can start this. No. I'll need. Can you activate this? Can you just start the? There's a little on the PowerPoints. I'm sorry, can't do that. Anyway, so let me just describe to you what the system does. So basically, you input the data, and the slide which we'll share with you, so you guys can look at it and see it afterwards. Literally, you put in the data scarcity numbers, water scarcity numbers in terms of how much volume of water you use. You put in the numbers as in how much is the recycled water, or how much is the rainwater harvesting that you use. The system then literally takes you, and the example that is shared with you is for a company called Novozymes in Denmark, where when you see it and you go to the results page, and the demo will show that to you, you will see that we can have worked out not just the impacts in Denmark, which is one of the main locations for the company because it's a biotechnology firm and it uses water for its products, but also in Tianjin in China. And whereas the effective cost to society of the excessive water use in Denmark is not very much, and most of it goes to the local consumers, it's only a cost of about what we call externalities in economics, the third-party costs of doing the business and drawing the water. That's only $300,000. Go across to their factory in Tianjin, we calculated that the answer there is $13 million worth, and that most of it is actually borne by the agricultural users in the area of Tianjin. That's the problem, right? If you look at in terms of percentage, in economic percentages, the externality in Denmark is only 2.5%, right? Whereas if you go across to China, it's 450%. So the cost that is being borne by the consumers, in this case largely agriculturalists, is actually 4.5 times what the market, their local market, is pricing water. So huge problem there. So these are some of the issues that come up when you look at the data. And that's what I think the sort of marriage of technology and sustainability has done for us. And it is not an option. We are not doing this because we are passionate about data. We are doing this because there's no other way of working out good solutions towards sustainability. I think that's the lesson that I've taken away from this. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Pavan. Yeah, sobering, always.
Yeah.
This information is very sobering, but very important to hear, and important that we continue to discuss and communicate it. Along those lines, Gerard, if you can also share with us then, in terms of the Global Business and Biodiversity Program, what are you trying to achieve? Where are you with this?
So our role as being part of IUCN, the International Union of Conservation of Nature, is really to influence society so that they really integrate nature, value and conserve it. And the business community, if you go 10, 20 years back, was finding nature an interesting topic, but not really knowing on how to deal with it. And I'm still talking to very large corporations which still say biodiversity, bio what? So there is still a language issue. Now, the good news is when we start talking about nature, yeah, people can relate much better to that. And so in our Business and Biodiversity Program, we've just laid out 3 very simple steps. The first one is value biodiversity, or value nature, if people prefer the nature word rather than biodiversity. And it's using the tools that Pavan just described. It's basically making sure that people understand there are impacts on biodiversity, but much more importantly, there are a lot of dependencies. Yep. And it's making them integrating the problem of nature not as a CSR, as a corporate social responsibility, or as a communication topic, but really integrate it and thinking about it. How much do I depend on nature, and what can I do about it to actually be more positive? And that's very interesting because we now see an upsurge of a nature positive movement coming up as well. So that's very encouraging. The second line, is what we call deliver biodiversity net gain. So it's actually being able, as a corporation, to demonstrate that you can actually be biodiversity positive. You can do things, even if you're a mining company or a construction company or an agri-food company. And by actually having these very tangible projects, concrete examples, sometimes small skills, but hopefully they can be scaled up, then you can demonstrate that, yes, actually, I'm a good citizen as a corporation, and I can contribute to this overall movement to really integrate nature more formally in our business models. And hopefully, it will also trigger some thoughts within, and let's not be candid about it, the oil and gas companies, for example, to really rethink their models as well. And actually thinking, well, do I need to continue to pump out fossil fuels out of the ground, or are there actually other solutions? And that's where the energy transition is so interesting, and we see a major shift. And then our third step is that invest in nature. Or now we want to focus it a bit more on invest in nature-based solutions, where it's actually saying, well, I'm a part of a bigger game. I'm just one of the landscape user next to many other users, where you've got the individuals, the citizens, the cities, the Canton du Valais, and it's actually together that we need to look at what's the optimal use of this finite resources that our planet is. Now, of course, water and the water scarcity is a very good example where you get people to work together and think about it. And it's the same in some of the landscapes where there's a lot of loss of fertility and degraded land, and there you get the people. But actually, these conversations should happen everywhere and by everybody and at all different levels. And that's why I'm so excited to be in this type of events like today, because I'm talking to a lot of very large multinationals, and I've got the chance to talk to their CEOs sometimes. But listening to startups, to SMEs, to smaller ventures, they're coming with very innovative ideas, new ways of doing things, is probably what we need more of. And we need then to see how we can support you to actually go and convince, together with us, some of these larger corporations on how they can help you scale up and actually broaden your solutions to a larger scale. So that's what the Business and Biodiversity Program is trying to do.
Wonderful, thank you. And do you think, André, then that biodiverse solution, or excuse me, yes, nature-based solutions apply to organizations across every domain? I mean, can they solve this many problems?
Well, I mean, maybe it's time to sort of take a step back and not get too much into the technology of it, and to realize a simple thing. We as humanity have sort of disconnected ourselves from nature. And so the idea of reintroducing into the value creation mechanism is still needs to be explained, still needs to be put into context. We have chosen 300 years ago, at the beginning of the industrial age, to measure our performance as society based on short-term profitability. So the models, we were talking about dependencies just now, the models that we have built up are my company is successful, my life is a success if I make loads of money shortly. And that, you know, I'm sorry to use very simple confederation compared to what economists would talk about, but that is where the system starts getting in trouble. Because if you are measuring just one aspect of the complex phenomenon of the interaction between human and the planet, and when I say the planet, I don't mean just natural resources, I also mean, of course, social and human systems, that's when you get into this dead end, this sort of bottleneck that we are facing at the moment. The pandemic has demonstrated that very clearly. We've spent the last 200 years concentrating on to becoming better and better at what we do. Better in terms of measurement of financial return. So we specialized, we sort of simplified, we went with models. And suddenly comes opposite that vision of humanity, a small little, well, it's not even a living organism, you know, something, a virus. A virus can only survive if it has a host. It does not survive otherwise. And that virus comes, and we are on our knees. The whole system collapses. And I think this is a collapse politically, socially, naturally. I mean, it's interesting to use that as a starting point. And if we want to rebuild the system in a more resilient manner, we will need to change the way we interact with nature in the broader sense. Nature, again, not only natural resources, but also social and human resources. It's not chance happening that suddenly people are marching in the street and telling us, you know, I'm part of a minority. Black Lives Matter, dare I say it, in Europe, gender equality. How come that we still have an unequal approach to the social systems? It is because we are measuring the wrong thing. So the World Economic Forum has published a statistic saying that half of the world GDP depends on nature, and therefore we should include that. I would argue that 100% of GDP depends on nature, but I'm not quite sure that I could demonstrate that. But half we can definitely prove, and the statistics are there. So how are we going to be able to rebuild this economy? I remind you that governments across the planet have decided that to restart the economy, they're going to make huge amounts of money available. I don't know, my latest count is something $14 trillion by governments across the planet have been spoken to restarting the economy. Now, I don't know if you know what $1 trillion is. I certainly don't. It's a lot of money. And the idea of introducing that into the system cannot be done with the same spoiled system that we had before. We need to introduce new ways of creating the values that are indispensable. And that's why I'm so excited about the event of today, because we are able to demonstrate, yes, on a small scale, that nature-based solutions, are a way to produce the revenue, the wealth we need, but spread in a more regional manner, in a more inclusive manner. And I think that's a very important word. We must not underestimate the social impact of a business activity. And nature has a way of inventing this constant balance of different factors. I mean, for years in the NGOs I participated about nature conservation, we talked about taking nature and keeping it protected. Today we realize that, in fact, that picture of nature at one moment changes all the time. It's, nature is chaos. It's disorganized chaos. It's a constant equilibrium rebuilding itself. So with our action as humans, we have destroyed that sort of mechanism which will allow it to rebalance itself, and we need to help with that. So creating a business opportunity out of nature and using the natural system to help us to create an inclusive and sustainable activity is, I think, more important than ever. And I hope that the governments who are going to give all these monies are going to give some green conditionality to them to try to introduce something a little bit more sensible into the way we think about the future. So that's nature-based solution as far as I'm concerned. It's much bigger than just nature.
Yeah. Absolutely. Please.
Perhaps I want to rebound a little bit on what André said, and also a comment he made with Tobias this morning. That there has clearly been a shift in the conservation community. I lived it, in the last 10 years within IUCN, where it was about conserving, safeguarding nature. And now there is a shift of, no, it's safeguarding society that we need to look at. And it's actually both. And that's the beauty of the nature-based solutions concept. It is for the benefit of nature and trying to restore, of course, biodiversity, having a biodiversity net gain, but it's also really for the benefit of the people. And why your solutions all make sense and are, because they are responding to a specific need, a specific challenge out there. And sometimes, from a conservation perspective, we were forgetting about this needs aspect that needed to be tackled. And that's the beauty now of the nature-based solutions concept. It starts and it has the word solutions in there, which makes it then very attractive to the finance world. The problem is, for the moment, we're still not 100% able, and we're working with a lot of different experts on how do we translate all this information to make it digestible and understandable by the finance community. Of course, there are some impact investments. There's the philanthropists that are willing to invest in nature because they see the value. They have been part of some of these conversations. But the mainstream banker, the mainstream investor is still saying, yeah, but what's the nature equivalent of carbon? Can you give me a CO2 equivalent? And nature is not as simple. So we need to come back and work with them on actually clarifying some of these elements. And that's where, again, we need your ingenuity, your examples of projects that have demonstrated how nature, or the inclusion of nature in the solution, has actually been more profitable economically. profitable with your stakeholder engagement, profitable for the planet ultimately, because there are a lot of additional co-benefits that are out there that we still don't measure, the more societal co-benefits, but now we are also trying to put a value on it and bringing it in there. But the area of water is a brilliant area for that, because the value of water now gets better realized. Pavan illustrated to us the value of water in the Rhone Valley is not the same as in some of very high water scarce areas, but we can reconcile these things.
And it can change.
And it can change.
The sadness of climate change is that it is a big driver of different outcomes and impacts. And as both of you have pointed out, some of the biggest outcomes and impacts are going to be on freshwater systems. I mean, the sad thing is that some of the richest nations in the US, I heard a statistic just yesterday that 2.2 million people in the US still do not have adequate and clean drinking water. So, I mean, clearly, if we are unable as a society to deliver the most fundamental resource of human life, then clearly we need to challenge ourselves with thinking differently, thinking better.
You mentioned as one of the challenges, I think Gerard, or maybe it was Pavan, one of the challenges, but maybe one of the things that really needs to be looked at is how to help these organizations scale up. That is the big question. How do you support them? Is it through increasing green financing? Is it communication? Is it, what is the best go-to mechanism at the moment? Is it measuring?
Well, you go first, but certainly measuring has a role. I mean, measuring has a role, but it's not the only thing that you do, right? So, but we have a fundamental problem, I think, and André both mentioned it and hinted on it, that we are constantly so fixated on A, profits, and B, short term, that we fail to understand the difference between value and price. Price is what you pay, value is what you receive. Nature delivers huge amounts of value to you every day, which doesn't come through any price-making system, doesn't come through any market, it's just nature. And our inability to understand this fundamental Econ 101 difference between price and value is the source of so many stupidities around the planet. It is just unbelievable. It makes me sometimes feel that, we should rename ourselves. We should stop calling ourselves Homo sapiens, which means wise person, but rather maybe,
Homo stupidus.
Homo stupidus or something like that, yeah. So I think coming back, digression, but the measurement point is really important. We have to measure the total performance. If we look at any of your different projects, whether it's engineering or biodiversity or whatever it is, if we look at your performance purely from the point of view of how much extra profits did you make for your shareholders this year and stop there, then we won't understand the true impacts of the business model that you are creating. And to capture the impacts of that business model, you need to measure performance of the corporation in a much more holistic way, in a sort of four-dimensional way. What does this business do for shareholders? Sure, important. What does it do for employees, human capital creation, development training, and so on, and downstream? What does it do for nature? Is it adding or is it subtracting to the availability of nature's goods and services over time? In your cases, all of them, from what I can see, were adding, not subtracting, compared to the sort of standard approach that our economy follows today. This needs to be measured and accounted for and reported. So when you report performance in future, I'm hoping, with the collective efforts of everyone, that the reporting of performance will mean four dimensions, not just profits for shareholders, not just impacts on human health and education and skills, but also impacts on society and impacts on nature. These are all measurable nowadays. So the excuse that this is complicated, this is difficult, yes, it is complicated, yes, it's difficult. Get used to it, my friends. Life is complicated and difficult. So this is now the way forward. And I think the more people begin to accept that performance of the company is not just about profits and not just about short term, the easier it will be for us to bring nature to where she deserves to be, which is right up front.
So to complement on that, Pavan, I would say now is the moment for action. It has been very interesting that we've had a very interesting 1.5 years. I mean, it's my first live event, and I'm super excited because it just changes so much. I've done a lot of Zooms, a lot of internet meetings, but when you don't have an audience, it's much more difficult to pass on the message. So now we need to get together again. And in the last year, we probably had a lot of time to think, a lot of time to reflect. We probably sold a little bit some of our actions, but nature hasn't. It's also very interesting on what has happened and how nature has recaptured some of their territories.
Space, yeah.
So what we are doing in Switzerland, for example, is through the Business and Biodiversity Program with a few other partners, Engageability or Infinitude, we're trying to put together companies, but also local players in Switzerland to actually think together about implementing nature-based solutions. And we are setting ourselves a target to actually develop 100 nature-based solutions in Switzerland, or at least linked back to the value chains in Switzerland, so that they can resonate outside the world. Just demonstrate the leadership of this country with all the ingenuity that there is, and being examples to others, so that we can demonstrate all these theories that we've got out there, all these measurement tools that are out there, when they're applied on the ground, they actually work, and they actually demonstrate this value. So we are really inviting you, and I'm inviting André indirectly, to have an Innovate for Nature soon, where we can then start demonstrating, or at least spark, these nature-based solutions with the cities of Zurich, with the airport of Geneva, with the Canton du Valais on the Rhone area, to actually demonstrate, yes, we are able to deliver nature-based solutions. These are all the benefits, the way we demonstrate, and we're even able to get then some of the financiers on the ground with their boots to actually go and finance these, and then really help thinking about how to duplicate that further. Now, very interestingly, we've got already 3 or 4 very large multinationals with their headquarters in Switzerland that are already part of that group. So they will be then the ambassadors throughout their whole network, being present in 60 or 70 countries in this world. So that's what we're trying to offer with the Swiss Base for Nature, leveraging on the Swiss expertise to a certain extent, but being a loudspeaker for things that need to happen in the rest of the world. And it is very interesting that sometimes nature-based solutions and conservation actions, we always think about, the global south, going in Africa, going in Asia. Of course, a lot of actions needs to happen there. But we shouldn't be forgetting about our very well-developed and managed world, and where the status of biodiversity for Switzerland is not good. And we really need to address that. So I just wanted to bring that down to very practical next steps as well.
Absolutely, that's also the objective of today. So thank you very much. André, Innovate for Nature?
Well, I think that the conversation about business is a crucial conversation here. We were talking about the amount of money that governments or elected people have made available for starting the economy again. The future, at least the next decade, will be based on these private-public partnerships. The governments are making money available, but they don't really know how to tackle the issue. We will need this entrepreneurial drive who will be able to sort of, well-directed, to concentrate on to creating proper value, not just financial value, but proper value that we can, so not just price, but value, as we were just discussing, so that business can be part of the solution, and I'm very much convinced that it is. The thing that strikes me is if I talk about the big companies that Gerard was just referring to, today, if you run a business just based on the principles of 2 years ago, you are confronted with 3 headwinds. I mean, your employees are asking you all the time, why are we doing this? There's something that needs, making money into into the Valais is not going to be enough. I need to know why I'm there. Secondly, the customers, the people who consume the goods that this company produces are all asking the same question. I don't want to kill the planet by consuming your product. Please help me. And now the financial community is more and more asking this question. We were talking about CSR before. If you go back to the ESG, the environmental, society and governance issue, this is huge. Today, if you launch a fund and you don't have an ESG logic, you are not going to be able to raise the funds you need. And that's a major shift, and that happened in the last 2 years. The G7 have just met, and the finance ministers have issued a communique where the word climate was mentioned 15 times. Not enough nature, but climate was mentioned 15 times. And that is significant. If you add to that, and we are here in the university, if you add to that the fact that everybody under 20 is absolutely not willing to compromise. Not only do they want change, they want it now, and they're probably it probably makes sense for them to do that. If you combine all this, how can you continue to pretend that the big corporation is following the needs of society and satisfying customer needs? They are not anymore. And so the challenge is really on that level. How do we adapt the big corporate model to be able to be sustainable? So rather than talking just about nature, business solutions, talking about the protection of nature or conservation, let's talk about durability. How do we build a human system that will allow us to survive the next generation? We are that close to disaster. And I'm glad to see that some young startups are coming with piecemeal solutions, which we are going to, I hope, be able to integrate into a new way of functioning for society.
Thank you. We're almost out of time in the panel, so I wanted to make sure that we had time for one or two burning questions. Anybody in the room? We do have a couple of questions. Do you want to run over the mic?
Did you?
All right. We'll get back to you.
I realize that we're slowly going away from water. Maybe you want to come back to water.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm Michael. And you mentioned, Pavan, the difference between price and value. And Gerard, I think you said the difference between preserving society and preserving environment. And if I take the utilities, which are highly subsidized, and as a result, the negative side is that it has nearly no price. So the price is very low compared to externalities, which means we waste a lot of water, for example.
A lot of waste, yeah.
And on the other side, if we don't subsidize it, we get to the point where, as you mentioned, people have no access to drinkable water or hygiene. So how would you square that fact? And do you think there's a way to raise awareness in another way than just hitting on the wallet? Thank you.
Yeah, there is.
Happy to start. So we were commissioned by the EU Commission to work on a project that's called We Value Nature. And it's really a campaign on raising awareness of the importance of valuing nature. And of course, there is a tendency by the economic actors to immediately go to economic values. What we are trying to do is to say, well, there are different types of values that need to be integrated in there. But what's really important is the societal value and the awareness raising on what is it in it for me in a certain sense. And as André was saying, it's very interesting to see also now really the employees and the consumers being pushing for that and needing the fact to realize that values has got different forms and existing values is also an important element in there. And what we realized is that effectively we were saying the same, but using very different terms or jargons, or even more dangerously, using the same term, but meaning a completely different thing. And that's again where I'm still coming back to nature-based solutions or some of the efforts that have been shown. Why are these ideas so good? Because they've gone really through a stakeholder engagement. They've worked with the local people, with the indigenous people, with the local communities, and then with the actors that are coming in there to go there. I've got a small anecdote to tell, if I may. I was privileged to be on a Vision 2050 exercise of WBCSD back in 2010. And we came with very big corporate booths to Mysore, which is just outside of Bangalore, and is actually the watershed for the Bangalore city. And we heard from self-help groups there that they had hydrologists, they had World Bank, they had so many experts come there with solutions. But none of them listened to them. And the moment that they started to figure out, you do this on this mountain, I do that, I've got cattle, I can give you this piece of land, that they came up with their solution on how to organize that landscape, it worked beautifully. It was still pretty close to some of the projects that were set out by the hydrologists of the World Bank and all these specific institutes, but it needed the people on the ground to actually implement that. And I think that that's where we're going to solve the issues of the utilities. You know, realizing the true and real value of water, and that needs to be explicit even more and more. And IUCN has put quite a lot of effort in there, and there's brilliant infographics that we can send you on that. But that's really the nut that needs to be cracked further, is the value of nature needs really to be recognized by all and by all economic actors.
And in specific response to your question on subsidies and water, not every subsidy is bad, nor should every subsidy be permanent, nor should it be done in a manner that is a watering can approach, where you basically water the subsidy across. So again, taking an example, Yarra Valley Water, which I know well, they do have subsidies for households which are identified through technology as being income stressed. So they actually specifically subsidize those households to be able to get cheaper water. And not only that, give them further credit. As against a normal 3-month turnaround, they are given 6 months to pay their bills. And that's targeted subsidies and targeted credit to the households which are stressed to enable them to survive. And in the process, they insist that they educate them on better use of water. So you see, there are ways of creating market-based mechanisms, technology-based solutions, in weaving that into the construct rather than just, boom, okay, we're going to make water cheaper for everyone, including the richest industries who are wasting it. That doesn't make sense, right? So this whole idea that we have to work in partnership with communities, with using technology to identify where the needs are, where equity is stressed, and where resources are stressed, and then provide solutions. Markets should be an enabler. Markets should not be the be-all and end-all or the ultimate goal of everything. The final purpose is not to convert everything into one price which applies for everyone. That's just mind-bogglingly stupid. Sorry, repeat it.
We've got time for one more question. Frank?
Thank you. It's more a comment or a provocation rather than a question. If I take this apple, how many of us all, could say how much biodiversity this apple is containing? I come from Italy, in a region where the apples are produced massively. And if I go there, when I go there, I don't find a lot of biodiversity. I find a monoculture, just apple trees everywhere. A lot of pesticides are used to have an apple very nice to see, and probably very sellable if you go to the grocery. So it's a provocation or comment. So I think, yes, the corporates we should incorporate in the system and ask them to take action. But we all, as consumers, I think, are in the same on the same carpet. We also have, when we go to buy something, ask ourselves, how much biodiversity am I buying here? Because maybe if this apple wasn't so nice to see, with some bugs maybe, a little bit, but maybe it could have more biodiversity inside rather than this apple that seems perfect, but then the impact of this apple on the local community, on that valley is not so nice. So thank you.
I know we're out of time, but Frank, to reassure you, the big agri companies have realized this. And there is a big group out there, which is the One Planet Business and Biodiversity group, which have really realized the agri-system is broken. We have forced or gone to monoculture and only relying to feed the world only on 7 crops. And that needs to be changed. We need to move to regenerative agriculture. That's the term that they use. And it's very large, big corporates that are driving this effort, but it needs to happen with the farmers, because it's the farmers' practices that need to be changed. And that's, again, boots on the ground, working with the farmers to actually create net positive farming. But that movement is on the run.
So, I mean, innovate for water, innovate for nature, innovate for the food system.
Seriously.
The food system really needs
Really
attention.
seriously needs it. Yeah.
I mean, somebody was mentioning this statistic, you know, the totality of the beef produced in the US comes from 2 bulls in 1970. I mean, the fragility of that system is just absolutely incredible. But anyway, I just wanted to end up on a note of excitement. This is not all negative. This is not, I mean, we are realizing the issue, the challenges in front of us. We want to go on doing something about this. And Innovate for Water is about this. There is an opportunity there which we can seize. And if business seizes it in the right dimension, we are going to improve the situation. And we are going to create this long-term thinking of a regenerative activity which is sustainable. So please, don't get too doom and gloom. This is an opportunity. It's not just a cost.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much. Nothing left to say other than thank you, gentlemen, for being with us today. To all of you for participating, it is now time for our coffee break, first one of the day. So I invite you to head out, mask on, please, grab a coffee, do some networking. Remember, left, right, left, no food, no drink, free to move around, right, there's drinks, but you got to pick a table and stay there. So remember those things. And of course, to all of you joining us online, you can now hit your virtual lounges and also do your own networking and probably have your coffee or your tea brewed from home. So All right, we'll see you everybody back in about 45 minutes at 11.